everybody. Welcome.
Hello.
Welcome to Century Guild Salon. I'm Kat Handler. I'm your host, your co-host with Thomas Negovan here. And today we are going to be doing a Q&A format for tonight's episode. And some of you have very kindly sent us some interesting questions that we're going to be answering this evening. So without further ado, this is my co-host, Tom.
That's very formal.
Yes.
For our thing here.
Yes, this is a very laid back episode where we're moving our offices right now, and we wanted to make sure that we.
I got dirt on my fingernails. We're packing a lot of boxes. I like that we dropped from 4 viewers to 2 immediately, but now we're back up. So as
What's
people
up,
get in,
you 4 beautiful people.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about what we're doing here today?
I do. We're here in beautiful sunny California.
Yeah.
Just enjoying your presence here, all 4 of you. And if you're watching this after the fact and you're not with us live, I also want to welcome you too. This is not only meant for the people who are able to tune in live, but for anybody who's interested in art, publishing, art history, Kickstarters, gallery activities, exhibitions, and whatnot. So we wanted to just open up an opportunity for people to ask questions, especially of Tom, because we have just run we're over 60 Kickstarters right now.
Yeah.
And so anybody who is an artist, entrepreneur.
Where's the chat? Does that show who's in here?
No, not until they do something. So if you did not get a chance to email us your questions, hey, Sean.
I was wondering if you were Sean.
If you did not get a chance to ride in a helicopter above us, you're more than welcome to post any questions you have in the chat live if you're joining us right now. You don't have to email them during the salon. We're going to be monitoring it, and we'll just be happy to answer live.
Yeah, we dismantled everything here in California because we are moving our offices to Chicago. And so we thought, this is our last one, probably for a while in California. And so we thought we would, just come sit out. We're actually on Kat's balcony right now. So this is the magnificent view that she's, and there's a little dog across the street. But yeah, this is the magnificent view that she has every day when she works.
Yeah.
Well, since Sean is here and Forrest is here, we can do their questions first. Do you remember what they are?
Fantastic. Well, let me pull them up right now just to make sure that I am quoting everybody appropriately. Let's see here. All right. It looks like we might be some technical difficulties. Give me just one. Okay, everyone. Sorry about that. We're having some Wi-Fi connectivity.
Okay, so Forrest says, I've always been fascinated by the symbolist art of Gustave Moreau, Odilon Redon, Fernand Knopf, et al. Did any of the symbolists do posters or commercial artwork that you know of? Would love to get my hands on some of their pieces, but I won't be able to buy one of their paintings in this lifetime. And would you consider doing a book on their work? Gustave Moreau predates the lithographic era. And Odilon Redon didn't do any specific posters. There was an exhibition poster for the 20 less XX that Fernand Knopf did, but I don't know if he designed and drew it or if they used his drawing, but it was for an exhibition for the group, the 20 in Belgium, that was the Symbolist organization in the 1880s, 1890s. Emile Fabry did a really cool one for the periodical Pour l'Art. Hans Unger did one for a periodical called Klein und Deck, and he did one for an organ company too. I think that was what it was for. It's got a woman with a harp, but I believe that it was an organ company. So there were some of the artists that were, like Carlo Schwab was a symbolist painter, and he did a lot of book illustration, and of course he did the Salon aux Croix posters. So you do see some. There's a oh my god, who is the guy who did the Carrier? Carrier did a really, really cool one for a magazine. Yeah, of course, Carlo Schwab. So yes, there are some. And the two things I can say is that they're extremely, extremely, extremely rare. And then the other thing is that they're surprisingly affordable, because the people who collect large lithographic posters, things like that, tend to look at these more symbolist works, which are generally monochromatic. And the posters like Mucha, or like if it was a Belgian poster for beer that was bright and colorful with reds and yellows, that might sell for many, many, many thousands of dollars, whereas one that was a Belgian symbolist might be $1,000 or $2,000 in comparison. So they're very affordable, but you see them really, really infrequently. I think maybe in the last 20 years, I've seen 3 or 4 of any of them by anybody. Yes, there are photo bombers. We have my friend Lycan is here helping us move boxes out. We're literally in the process of moving, but wanted to be here.
Yes, I like it. I was also, when you mentioned...
and there's Chandra moving boxes in the background.
From moderating the chat to moderating the move. That's Chandra.
What are you going to say?
I was just thinking about that period, which was considered like a golden age of the bibliophile, of those beautiful luxury books. And as far as symbolists go, you had people like Schwab and Manuel Orazzi and Almery Lobel Riche doing books like Le Fleur du Mal.
Lobel Riche was later. Lobel Riche was
okay.
1923.
Oh my God, thank you. Thank you.
Manuel,
I think I got confused.
Manuel Orazzi's Fleur du Mal was later as well. Carlos Schwab did it in 1900.
Well, right here.
The thing everyone wanted to know.
Yes. Well, the reason I conflated them all with that era is because it's so symbolist in its approach, visually.
Yes. Yeah, the thing that, this is going to be crazy tangents, that we don't have visuals for this, but the thing about, Le Fleur du Mal obviously being such a timeless collection of poems, when Manuel Orazzi did his version, which I think was also 1923, he was very out of favor. In 1900, Art Nouveau was, of course, exciting. And that kind of Byzantine style that he did by 1910 was just completely passé aesthetically. And they hired him to design Atlantis for the movie L'Atlantide, the French early cinema. And then he had just a little resurgence in Paris and did a beautiful and really weird Le Fleur du Mal. And there are some of those in is it Infernal Creatures that it's in? Infernal Creatures has some of his Le Fleur du Mal pieces. But I'll go to another question.
Yes, let's do it.
I don't know who wrote this because I just pasted the questions in this, so I apologize. But I believe it was a young lady who wrote in and said, I have some questions for Kat. She is the salon host, but I feel like I don't know much about her besides that she has a great sense of humor. I'm curious to know. And by the way, she has her Chuckle Emporium Kickstarter running right now. Her Art Nouveau humor. What led to her interest in art? How did she come to work for? So we'll take them in sections. So let me ask you this.
Okay.
What led to your interest in art? Please don't say Marilyn Manson.
Okay. Darn. I don't think anything led to my interest in art. I think I just always had it. But I was drawing from as far back as I can remember. I always had trouble focusing in school, and I just had no interest in school unless it appealed to me creatively in some way. And I always just knew it as a language that I was able to express myself through, and was romantic to me in every sense of the word. And it was a language that I understood immediately, just being a more visual person. And so it was kind of like, you know, if you're in a family that specializes in a certain thing, and maybe it's expected of you to do that, and you just grow up thinking, well, this is just what I'm going to be involved in. It's
so are there any artists? I'm looking at her other questions and then kind of applying them here. Are there artists that you loved when you were younger that you still love today? Like, is there anyone that resonated with you?
The first thing that comes to mind is this painting by Jan Levens that's hanging in the Getty Museum, and it's a portrait of the two figures are either known to be, or they're almost metaphorical for Aristotle and Alexander the Great. So Aristotle, he's a central figure, and he has his hands sort of outstretched over this massive tome. And Alexander is sitting in a margin of the painting, and he's kind of looking off. But I remember looking at that painting and listening, because they had these little headphones that you could rent and listen if you put in the code for the artwork. And I remember listening to that description over and over for that painting and just staring at it. And I don't know what it is particularly that drew me to it, but it is a beautiful painting, and it moved me for some reason. And
well, I will tell you that now she is completely surrounded by clowns.
I will also say, yes, as a child, my grandmother collected clowns, and now I also collect clowns.
Yeah, she's
there
got
are a lot of
clowns.
clowns in
A
the
lot of
house.
clown artwork.
Yeah.
A lot of if you were afraid of clowns, it would be nightmare material. What are we'll do this rapid fire. What's name 3 favorite bands or songs?
Oh my God, Fats Waller.
She's been listening to a lot of that.
I'm thinking about who I've been. I mean, that could be a whole episode. Fats Waller, Prince, and Roxy Music, T-Rex.
There's a lot of Roxy Music and T-Rex coming out of her corridor.
Mm-hmm.
Favorite movies. What's the last movie you saw that you thought was extraordinary?
It's always when you get asked that you just forget you've lived a life up until this moment. I remember feeling very embarrassed for a very long time, and this is a very vulnerable moment for me, but I felt very embarrassed for a long time that I had not yet seen The Seventh Seal, Ingmar Bergman's The Seventh Seal.
No. Her favorite movie is absolutely What About Bob?
It's not. You said, what was the last movie I saw that I thought was extraordinary?
You've watched
Slander.
What About Bob recently?
What About Bob is a cinematic treasure, as is the birdcage. We've quoted the birdcage today.
Yeah.
It's literally
Yeah.
they're two
And
cinematic
then,
masterpieces.
what about books?
I have really enjoyed. Gosh, I'm drawing a blank here. I have really enjoyed Carl Topfer's book on pantomime. I have been enjoying reading that.
Kat is working on a book about Pierrot. And so she is reading a lot of reference books on that subject. So there's a lot of that in your life.
There's a lot of that in my life.
And Tashaja, I think, is the person who was asking about you in the evening, if I remember correctly. But yes, we've watched What About Bob and the Birdcage quite a lot. Sean wants to know if there's going to be any new projects with Gail Pataki. And the answer is yes. We really want to do a book with her this year. Another hardcover overview is long overdue. And so it's something that we've been working on. We've got it kind of mapped out, but it's not ready to go. There's just a lot kind of on our plate right now, but it will happen, and it will happen within the next year for sure. And yes, Hank is there. It's brilliant.
Yes.
And Sean also wanted to know if there's anything that I wish that I had kept. And I think that, the thing about, like, we're spending our time now doing the more academic work. And I think that the thing about when you're doing it for commerce is that it's more of a privilege to get to experience a thing. Like the number of Art Nouveau ceramics or objects or rare books or posters that I've been able to have my hands on, whether it's something I was selling, something that I was brokering, something that I was, just assessing for a collection, things like that, that getting to see such huge quantities of extraordinary work it's very mind expanding, both internally and in terms of just raising your threshold. I think if you're open to it and you're really noticing the nuance, like when you look at stone lithography, for example, there's a Chinese principle about the lines and textures that move through all things. And so when you look at a limestone lithograph, there's a subtle difference to that in comparison to a zinc plate lithograph. And you start to develop so much sensitivity that it gets a little bit, it can be maddening, I guess, if you become that much, you have to be able to utilize it and not let it run you. But so in terms of, do I feel like there's things that I miss? Like, there are definitely less with the paper and more with ceramics, objects that were just so incredible in a three-dimensional space that it's an unreproducible experience, whether it's to touch them or see them in different light. And so there are pieces that I miss, but I also respect that, you can't just hoard everything, and that part of the nature of what my deal with the devil was getting to handle all of these things, but then having to relinquish them. And a lot of the pieces that mean the most to me aren't the most expensive, like all the big Muka posters that we've had that we've sold. The hardest things in the world to sell were the Le Pater related pieces. And so I eventually just kind of gave up on that. And the symbolist things, I was trying to deal in symbolist art for a really long time. And that was really extremely unproductive. Like, we were dealing in really macabre things, really great symbolist stuff. And we'd have it at an exhibition and nobody would look at it. And they would be like, do you have a champagne poster? And so I kind of made terms with the fact that the stuff I really loved wasn't really what the best stuff was to sell anyway. But it's proving to be the most interesting work to talk about. And so the things that are in the books that we've published are all generally things that didn't sell for a lot of money, or just took forever to sell, kind of thing. And then the things that we don't put in books, the things that sold really quickly for a lot of money, are generally just the most, to be honest, kind of least interesting.
Would you say that that is what propelled you into publishing? Was after a time of finding that balance between things that you were passionate about and commerce?
Yeah, totally. Because we would find, so we started doing Comic-Con. I mean, it was 17 years ago. We did it for like 14, 15 years. And I was finding we would do a show like that, and we would bring the weird stuff. And I remember having an Alphonse Mucha poster and Adam Hughes running across the floor and hugging it, and people coming in and knowing, like, recognizing a really weird, rare Italian poster artist or something and saying, oh, is that Hohenstein? And be like, how do you know that? And the first sale that we made, for at least, kind of right in there, were like Bud Plant and Charles Vess, and they knew what this stuff was. And so that was really, really enriching to get to talk about Heinrich Loeffler and all of these artists that I love, but it wasn't sustainable outside of that. And so it was great that we had the stuff. It was great that we did that show. But what happened more often is we'd have some pieces like that at places like the Merchandise Mart in Chicago or things like that. And the people who want to talk about it would be like an art student. It would be someone that loved it, maybe knew what it was, more likely than not didn't, but really wanted to talk about it. But, they just could never afford it. And so the thing I like about the publishing is that I can devote all my energy to talking about the work that I really love to talk about. Le Pater is a great example. The stuff in, in all these books, it's all the great stuff. I love that German stuff from the 20s. We've never been to Denver. We only did the one in San Diego because there was a big market there for people that bought original art. And so there were people there that were there to spend money. And it was just a very unique show in the education surrounding the work mixed with the willingness to pay for it. And so it was a very, very fruitful place for us to be for a great long time. We can answer Forrest, because that kind of leads into Christian's question. There's no way Christian is here because he lives in Australia.
Well, if you are here, Christian, then props to you, my friend.
I think it's like, I don't know what time it is. But he wants to know about the music that I'll be working on. And Forrest said, you both obviously love art. Do either of you create art or have other creative outlets outside of writing? And Kat makes a lot of puns, which is why she made her new Kickstarter. And then one of the reasons that we're kind of shifting our offices a little bit is there's going to be more space. It's going to be organized a little bit differently. And the thing that I did before I was an antique dealer and just kind of concurrently is I've always done a lot of things in music and in film. And so Kat is really taking over the antique business, and I'm spending more time doing music and a little bit with film. And then, of course, things like, the big thing when we unpack, I've got all the Caligula stuff to finish, a Caligula book, and then also the Ilse book. I'm really, really dying to do the Ilse book because it's beautiful and cool. The cup up close. You know what? This came from the Mexican restaurant across the street from our gallery in Culver City. That's right.
God.
This was Tommy's little cup.
That was EK Valley.
EK Valley. I'm pretty sure that's where it came from.
Stop by EK Valley.
I think that is.
Their
Yeah,
food
EK
is
Valley is
amazing.
outstanding.
Yes, the music. Looking forward to that. And so I wanted to. Are there any other questions on that list right now?
I do not think so.
Okay.
I think people were very shy.
It's okay, because I'll talk. Next time you'll send questions, because I'm just going to keep talking. Well, I wanted to ask you.
Me?
Because
or our friends in the audience.
I wanted to ask you if, as an artist who has.
Well, let's say hi to who's here real quick.
Sure.
Sean is here. Anne, hello. Forrest, Deshasia. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. I don't know who you are, CJ Star. I know we've gone through this before and you've told us and then I forget. I'm sorry, what was your question? Please continue.
Thank you.
Yes, sorry.
That's all right. Hi, everyone. You're an artist and you have built a livelihood around art. And that's not something that a lot of people have the opportunity to do. And I wanted to ask you, for people who are creative and who want to build their lives in that field in some way, what would be your biggest suggestion for somebody?
That's a big question. What do you mean? What do you mean?
We've got 30
Narrow
minutes.
it down a little bit. I mean, I think so. If what I think you're asking, I was pursuing music full time, and was doing some orchestra direction, and I was performing a lot, singing and playing guitar and recording and things like that. And I was with a friend who was very successful, and they were on tour. And I remember I was sitting with the singer in the band on this tour bus, and we were talking about how much money they were making. And I just remember thinking that it didn't sound sustainable. And I hate to say that I was thinking about it like a business, but I was thinking about just how many musicians and creative people I knew that were struggling, that were, not just 20, but 30, 40, 50, and older, that were having. And I think about people like, and I didn't know them at the time, but like Genesis Peorage at the end of their life, like having a lot of financial problems. And I just was thinking like, man, I've got all this great stuff that I want to do, and it just doesn't seem like that's the sustainable path for the majority of people. And so I started to think, okay, well, what's my real goal? And I thought, I'd rather be doing music kind of in the last decades of my life than the first decades, and then looking for a job when I'm 40 or 50. And so the thing that I did is I took all of my sensitivity to music and my sensitivity to aesthetics, which I had, and just figured out how to apply it to something that I could make money with. And for me, it was, I loved art. I loved symbolism. I loved Art Nouveau. I loved these things. And so then between working in a teach store and galleries and all of that, it just, I guess what it was is that I removed my ego from it, and the music wasn't the thing that I needed to do for anyone else. And I found a way to make what I was doing for a day job really closely art adjacent. And it doesn't me, I mean, a good example might be, I don't know. I guess I can't think of another example. For me, it was being an art dealer. It was being an antique dealer. And so that's my personal story. As far as how I would advise someone else, I just feel like everybody is so different. But I think that the thing that I would say, something that I do keep thinking about all the time, is writing a book that helps bridge the gap between art and the art business, because I know so many artists that don't have confidence on the business side. And then I know so many business people that have no respect for what it takes for the creative element. And you see this a lot. Like, look at Hollywood right now. You know, like, it becomes so corporate that it's not about the storytelling, it's about numbers, and the art suffers, you know. But then on the other side, I know so many artists that just have this inherent disdain for anything having to do with what they perceive as the establishment. But you need both of them. And so I think if you start to make that pact, sometimes other avenues open up. And so for me, I was surrounding myself with art and antiques all the time, and was able then to make that the thing that I did all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was still kind of the same social scene in terms of you're talking to, you know, creative people all the time, whether they're buying it or not. I don't know if I answered your question or not.
No, there was a lot of great.
Deshacia. It's beautiful.
It is a beautiful name.
Christopher, it's nice to know that's your name. It's mundane after Deshacia. Sorry. What's the oldest thing you've ever beheld in art? The answer for you would probably be me, because I'm 50 years old. I mean, you know, to answer that question, you can go to a museum like you go to Rome, and there's things that are centuries old. But I can say, in terms of what I've physically handled or like dealt in, we really stop around like 1880, 1890. So there's things from maybe 1870s, but 1880 through 1920 is really, to me, that's the pocket of like 1880 is kind of like when the fuse is lit for just this massive explosion of, you had people having telescopes and microscopes in their homes for the first time. And so their world opening up to the idea that there's unseen worlds. And so you get this convergence of technology and metaphysics, and it creates this crazy art explosion. And then all of that has these peaks and valleys. And then you have World War I, which is, of course, this horrific, decimating experience. And then the aftermath of that, the birth of Expressionism, is another incredible peak. And so I feel like that's a complete story to me, 1880 through 1921, 22. I don't know if I answered the question or not.
Yeah.
A year and 17 days, 50 years young. That's right, 53, Forrest. We should, I should post lyrics on my website. I definitely will be making a record across the next year, and those songs will both be on there. So those will have lyrics. I'm sure we'll do a really cool book. I know a lot of artists, and so I've got a lot of things in my head. When do you think steampunk originated? I really don't know when that term came from. Definitely after I was cool. I remember when it was new, but I don't remember when that was.
My guess is going to be the early aughts. Maybe
Probably.
late 90s.
I was so not cool at that point. I was in my 30s. I was like reading art history books.
I haven't been cool yet, so maybe we can work on that a little bit.
Forrest asks if we'll be doing gallery shows in Chicago, and we will. one of my really good friends owns a gallery called Gallery Fleet or Mouse, and we'll be using his space. It's beautiful. He and I have identical aesthetics. He's just better at commerce than I am. So it will look like a Century Guild show, but it'll be magnificent. And we're going to do a Gale show there, I believe in October. But we'll be using his space to do stuff. So we'll be trying to do some things in Chicago. And we'll be out doing things in LA. I'm not entirely sure when or what. We'll be out for things like the Oddities Flea Market, but we'll still have a big presence in LA, but also in Chicago. And also because we'll be closer to New York, we'll be doing things in New York more too. So that'll actually be even cooler. We'll be in 3 cities much easier. And Sean wants to know if I would be interested in sharing how Century Guild began. I'll tell you where the name came from. The name is obviously the British Arts and Crafts Organization, but I had this book obviously this book that I had that had weird old Art Nouveau jewelry, and I got it because it had this cool bat thing in it. And I was reading the introduction, and it talked about something about the Century Guild in England. That said it in passing. And like the band, the Dream Academy, I was like, that's a great band name, Century Guild. And at the time I was just doing music full time, and I'm like, this should be my band name. And I never did anything with it. And then when I started doing things that were kind of on, the antiques front and needed a business name, I was like, Century Guild makes a lot of sense. And so because we had the 19th century stuff, and then 20th century, when it became the 21st century, we Century Guild, the finest art of 3 centuries. So that's where the name came from.
There's that great artwork too in Flowering Lines. I believe it's a book cover, if I'm not mistaken. I'm having trouble remembering right now, but it's got those undulating lines. It's black
like
and
the
white. First
Art Nouveau artwork. But is that in Flowering Lines?
It is.
It is. It is. I know it's in Le Pater too. That's McMurdo.
Yes, thank you.
Ren's City Gardens. Christopher. Sean works at the Denver Museum. So yeah, I don't
We
know
need
how
to start
connect
a message board or something.
Yeah. That sounds like a great museum. And so then the way that it started is it started with a $15 print. I wound up, I think that the root of it was just that when people would say, do you think that you would ever want to have your own antique store or something? And I always said no. I liked can you delete that comment or not?
I don't know that I can right now.
Oh. There we go. Let's see if it works. I never wanted kind of that responsibility. I liked working in galleries. I thought I'd be doing music. And I think that just what happened was that, the real answer is just that the guy that I worked for was super, had great taste, and was kind of challenging to work for. And I was moving further away, and there were just kind of a lot of convergence of things. And I really wanted to focus on dealing in symbolist art and the more macabre things, images like this and stuff. And that wasn't what we were doing there. And then I did that for a few years, and then I found out why someone who owned a business wasn't specializing in that material, because it was impossible to find, to build an inventory, and it was really difficult to sell. Scary clown, exactly. The clown comes. That's why people are afraid of clowns. But yeah, so that's the short answer to why we did it. And then just it became kind of, I think you asked, like, how did I meet some of the artists, I mean, like, I knew Doug from when I worked in a comic book store. I knew Gail because it was right when I started the gallery, and I was in an Art Magic bulletin board thing, and anybody who posted a question, she would immediately answer with this really, really insightful, detailed answer. And it was because she had a massive library on Symbolist Art, Art Nouveau. And so the funny thing is I thought, oh, maybe she'll buy some art. And so I started chatting her up, thinking maybe she'll want to buy something. And then she said, oh, I'm a painter. And I thought, oh, she's not going to buy anything. And then also, oh, and she's going to probably paint like unicorns or something. And so then she showed me her work, and I lost my mind. It was so, so, so good. And I wanted to buy something of hers. And she had just graduated at that point, and I was trying to get her to let me come to her studio so I could buy a painting. And she was like, what is with this guy? He keeps wanting to come to my studio. So she made sure that the day that I came, her neighbor was there. But I bought a piece, and then just over the years, we became best friends. And, you know, that was 20-something years ago now. And then the way that I started kind of representing her is that I had someone from the Detroit Institute of Art that was coming to look at a piece of porcelain, and I had it on a piece of furniture, and they were looking at it, and they said, yeah, that's great, but what's this? Who did this painting? And the painting was one of Gail's paintings that I had purchased. And so it just kind of, in that moment, I was able to connect him with her to buy this piece. And then the other thing is just a lot of artists have a really, really hard time with commerce, with asking for money, with collecting money, with all of that kind of stuff. And so it was just an easy thing to keep helping her. And it was kind of the same thing with Stephanie and Agaki. We were friends, and I liked her work a lot, and she was working a day job. And so I just made a business arrangement with her that allowed her to do her first show. And from then she's hit the ground running and done outstanding. And she just needed like just a little bit of business support in the front end. And then really quickly, Jeremy, Doug Klauba gave me a copy of his comic book, and I didn't look at it for 11 months. And then by the time I saw it, he was coming to Chicago in a month. And I saw it, loved it, bought a bunch of work from him, and he also just needed some kind of business support. And so I wound up helping him, and that's why I started publishing his things. And, you know, he just couldn't really find anyone that wanted to support what he was doing the way he wanted it done. People wanted him to color his work, things like that. I was like, don't color it. It's perfect the way it is. And so it's almost kind of like being a music producer or something. It was just, you know, sometimes artists just, and Jeremy was a great example of this, needed someone just to tell them what you're doing is great. Keep doing what you're doing. Well, I take so long. I was like, yeah, that's part of the sales pitch, is that you take a long time. You're not busting these out in 2 days. And it worked. You know, the work is outstanding. He's infinitely better every year. And, you know, his stories are great. And he's a super, super nice guy. Have you ever read The Clown Cycle?
I have not. Is that a scary clown story?
John F. Cart sounds like a mystery writer.
I'm not familiar with Stephen Fabian.
I don't know who Stephen Fabian is either. I don't know a lot about American artists from any era, which is strange. Like even, and not even like English and stuff. Like Sean, you mentioned Ruskin pottery. Like I've had a couple pieces, but I'm not really familiar with it. It's mostly Germany, France, Italy are the areas where I found the most interesting materials. Aren't all clown stories scary? I don't know. What, you want to answer that?
No.
No, you do want to answer it, but your answer is no.
That was my answer. I I don't know how far you want me to get into this, but I don't.
Well, here, I'll say something.
Okay.
So when people come in and they start talking to me about art or things like that, I know it's really easy for me just to start going on a tangent. And then someone was like, oh, nice vases. And I'm like, oh, this is stoneware. This is porcelain. This is whatever. It's like that with clowns. I had no idea about all of the different archetypes of clowns, and that you could look at them in what's the word?
A hierarchy, or not even a hierarchy, but a good way to put it is archetype, but it's also just the complexity also comes from the historical context and where these things became popular, and what region this type of clown is from, because a French clown is going to look very different from an American fairground clown. And it depends on how at what time, what tools were at a culture's disposal to spread this likeness and this art.
Sounds like the stuff of nightmares. Not really. But anyway, so this is why she's writing a Pierrot book, because she was telling me all of this. She was building this great collection, and I said, you should put this in writing. You should write a book. And there's such great artwork.
It's yeah, I mean, Pierrot is a figure that I'm personally very passionate about, historically and aesthetically, and from a literary sense. But as far as the scary clown thing is concerned, I respect that it works for some people, like as far as horror movies or aesthetically. And I don't mean to come off from any kind of hilltop whatsoever, but I will say, I feel like a lot of that scary clown thing has become almost a cash grab, but also like the edgelord.
Well, people ask her all the time, like, oh, you must love the movie It. And she's like, no, that's not. Harlequin Valentine by John Bolton is great. I have to find that for you.
Okay.
I have it. It's still in storage. But yeah, John Bolton is so great.
Thank you.
And Derek, thank you for the nice comment. Derek says that Le Pater is his first book from Century Guild, and that it's inspiring, and all the other books will be a letdown after Le Pater, because that's the best one. So there's a lot of interesting ones, but what we did with most of the books is we try to treat it like if you were walking through the gallery with me and I was telling you a story about this or that or the other thing. Whereas Le Pater was, it took me about 3 years to write. And I do have another one that I'm working on. I guess it's not like a big secret. I can say I'm going to do a Grand Guignol book. And so that's one that I've been, the way that I had the run up to Le Pater, I'm doing the same thing. So within the next 2 years, that'll be out. And then I think, like, not necessarily inspirational, but just in terms of interesting, I really like Infernal Creatures. I think is really cool. You might want to try that one. Would I consider writing on the Neo-Gothic Pre-Raphaelites? I don't know anything about them, to be honest. Aside from the tangential things like, people maybe like Edward Burne-Jones or something that kind of have that veer into symbolism a little bit. But I know a lot about German and Italian and Austrian and things like that. But I think that the reason I never got into it is that I feel like England and America were always so thoroughly explored. And the thing that was happening for me is that I would see a piece of Jugendstil artwork, which is the German Art Nouveau, and I couldn't find any books on it in English. And that to me was like where I saw a need to bring these things forward. And then the Italian work, the Italian Art Nouveau, and in symbolism and things from that era. And not that I would do this, but like in Italy, you've got designers like Chini that are kind of maybe where, you know, the arts and crafts people might have been in England. And everybody could talk about arts and crafts in England up and down, left and right, but there are no books really on Chini in English. I mean, I think there might be 2, but certainly not like what it is for England or America. So I do kind of lean a little bit away from those. Thank you, Sean, and thank you, Christopher. What else should we talk about? We have 10 minutes left.
I'm reading Christopher's Twin Peaks reference here.
Would I say that the obscurity of those areas of our history created a bit of mystique or romanticism for me as well? The answer is actually no. And here's why I think that. Because I've thought about this before. I think it's that you go to museums, you can see these American things, and they're extraordinary, and they're great work. But I think that my road backwards through time does filter so heavily through the 1970s comic book art and 1970s rock music. And so when you're looking at the psychedelic aesthetics, you're looking at the fantasy artists, you know, whether it was from the 20s through the 50s, Virgil Finlay or any of that, they were so heavily influenced by these European artists. And so I just personally always felt that the American and English had just a little bit of a top button. And I feel like here's a great example. When you look at, I felt like a preacher in that moment. You're like, mm-hmm.
Well, I was thinking this whole time, I was like, it's a little like stiff, and I didn't want to say it because I don't want to be.
But when you look at like a great example is look at Jan Toorop. And if you're not familiar with his work, Toorop. And he had the idea that humanity, nature, and other worlds that we can't even see, that they're all connected. And in his work, the fact that the humans have tendrils that are going down into the earth, and then that goes into like the bones underneath and comes up through the trees, and then there's ghosts in the sky merging with the trees. It's so beautifully encapsulates everything that is great about 60s psychedelic art and things like that.
And very in that spiritual realm too. Like
it's hyper spiritual, you know, and that's Dutch 1880s, 1890s. And so I wasn't getting any of that. Of course, occasionally, would you trying to tell me something?
No, I'm sorry, my
she keeps tapping my leg.
Sorry.
And so I don't get that as much from the Americans. So I have a huge romance with the Pre-Raphaelites, but I enjoy them as a spectator. And same thing with a lot of Americans. So the romance isn't the mystery, Sean. The romance to me is the way that they chose to approach their work. It was so visceral and metaphysical. Metaphysical really is the one for me that I really connect to. And Forrest, I spent massive amounts of time at the Art Institute. I love it. And have, you know, a lot of favorite works there that I'm looking forward to showing to Ken in a week or two. Gustave Doré, love Hieronymus Bosch. I mean, Hieronymus Bosch is, he's a great example of, there's such a clear line from him to some of the weird metaphysical work that I'm talking about, in that he, you know, was really trying to show things that couldn't be seen with the eyes. So yeah, I mean, I love that work, but it's not things I really know about, again, unless it's as a spectator.
You know what I think is, for me personally, is a draw of that era and those movements is it's so not based in any kind of literal
How do you
realm.
say it as a positive?
It transcends the literal and the mundane in such a
Which
beautiful way.
movements?
Well, we were talking about Torah. You have symbolists. I mean, even the romantics, and I mean, I would take it artist by artist, of course, but I think as you get into Art Deco, you have, you know, the highly commercialized work, and it's like a bottle of wine and a cup, and it's, you know, it's beautifully made.
So you're talking about poster art?
Any art, any visual art form. And I think as soon as something becomes too grounded in the literal and in reality, I think, I don't know.
Well, I would argue that they painted cups and bottles at the turn of the century, as well as in the Art Deco era. And I think that what I think you're reacting to is the idea that what happened by the 20s is that at the turn of the century, they were rejecting technology. And by the 1920s, they had come to terms with it, and that generation was embracing it. And so when you're looking at things like advertising, the essentialization of the ad was much closer to what we think of as modern advertising,
Mm-hmm.
whereas in the 1880s, for sure, it was based in allegory. And then if you're talking about paintings and things like that,
I mean, even film, like German Expressionism completely went off that road.
went off what road?
It was more emotional than literal.
Well, but that to me is the pendulum swinging back. It gets complicated when you get into that era, because now we're getting into this will be a whole other thing. We only have 3 minutes left. So my brightest, funniest memory of Jen. So when I met Jen, a very good friend of mine who I haven't spoken to in far too long, is a fantastic violinist, and her name is Mina, and she was very close with Jen and wanted us to meet. And so Jen was going to come with the band to the gallery, and we were just kind of hold a salon, like the art was all there, and it was after hours. They were in town. They had a show the next night, and I'd never had any interest in psychic TV or Jen's work. Really, just kind of knew of him/her. But Mina said, "No, you really need to meet Jen." And I then read a little bit about Jen and thought, this person sounds terrifying. Like, I'm hearing stories about, when they choked a promoter, all of these things. I'm like, this is going to be an interesting night. But I trust Mina implicitly. And so then Jen comes in with the band, and a couple of things happen. First of all, everyone in the band was extraordinary on a human level. I hit it off in a really, really big way with Alice and just loved her immensely. Jeff, the guitarist, was very, very, very cool. Those were the people I really connected with. And then Jen was so warm and so loving that I didn't know how to take it, with all of the things that I'd read, the stories I'd heard, the enfant terrible of England and all of this. And she came in, and it was just like this earth mother energy, and so warm. And then she said to me, people think about all the industrial music and modern art things, but my origins were in symbolism, in this romanticism. And so we were then she loved the gallery, and we're talking about all of these things, and she said that's why with the band now we're performing Hawkwind and things that connect to this 1960s sensibility. So I wasn't expecting to be having those kind of conversations and to be feeling so much like I was in such a warm and loving presence. Was not expecting that. And then just someone that stayed in touch. Like I would get a text message or a Facebook message at 2:30 in the morning, and just, you know, I mean, you know, different people are different people at different points in their lives, whatever it is. But my experiences were universally positive, and Jen was the voice of the monster for Aurora. You know, she did that for me, which was really, really generous and kind. And then the funniest I think you said funniest too. Was it down there? Well, the brightest, funniest. Okay, so I can tell you just the funny one is that I had done the TED Talk at this point for wax cylinder recording. And so I had the recorder there in the machine, and they were all really excited by it. And I recorded Jeff playing some guitar. And then Jen did a little speech into the wax cylinder recorders. So I have this wax cylinder recording of Jen telling a story about drugs at the airport. And I'll just have to post that online at some point. But it was very funny. And in the recording, you could hear everyone in the room bursting out laughing. But yeah, my experiences were just universally positive. Really, really, really nice.
That's beautiful.
And then I guess well, we're 2 minutes over, but have you ever encountered poison, like named for the rose poisonous? Don't know what that means. Name of the Rose? I know the movie with Sean Connery. I know the band. That Sean just said, like Augur from the Dark Crystal. That, I mean, it's pretty fitting. I mean, it was really, I mean, I really can't explain it except that it was just like, this is purely speculative, and it's not something I've thought about, but it makes sense kind of in a linear sense. It's almost like a person who had explored every territory that there was to explore on the map, and they were home again. That's the way I would explain it. Is it was like she was going by Genesis Prior Peerage, you know, the merging with Lady J, and just so comfortable in her skin, and just unshockable, unflappable. And so that Augur thing is a great example. And the reason I keep saying Earth Mothers, it was just like so, like, you know, like when someone's elder is telling you a story about, oh, and then when they asked me to leave England or things like that. It's just crazy, you know, like Helen Mirren talking about her wild days in the 70s or something. It was just, you know, it's just great stories and very, and that's the thing is I feel like all the shock, everything, like every boundary ever had been pushed, and all that was left was just, you know, a strange comfort. So it's a very positive thing to think that is something that's achievable. Used poison ink? No, I've never encountered that. But we are 4 minutes and 15 seconds over.
Everybody's going to write in and complain.
So first of all, thank you guys for being here. Second of all, the next salon we do will be in a very different space. We will not have this luxurious view behind us, the mountains of Southern California. And we're going to, you know, we're still the last one and this one were kind of just a little exploratory for us. So if there's any thoughts that you guys have on how we can focus what we're doing moving forward, or what you guys find the most interesting. Anyone watching this, whether you're here live or if it's later, we do get a lot of views later. Yeah, please email us. You can email us at salon@centuryguild.net, or just leave things in the comment section. But, you know, as we are doing more focused things just with our own releases in the rest of the year and things like that, we just want to try to recreate the salon experiences that we used to have at the gallery in a virtual space. And so we definitely need some guidance and advice as to how to do that.
I second that. Yeah, please let us know what you'd like to hear more about, what new and exotic settings you'd like to see us in.
Can you
From
see
the
it?
car.
Can you see a moving truck? You can see the nose of our van. That's it. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, so
yeah.
much for being here.
And yes, there'll be a lot about Gallery Fledermaus and a lot about Caligula in the next couple months, which I'm super excited about. But yeah, thank you to everyone for being here.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys. We'll see you very soon.